Welcome to 5 Minute Fridays. Today, in 5 minutes or less, I'm going to try to talk you out of leaving the church. I love an apocryphal story about Henry David Thoreau, who was put in jail for civil disobedience. Ralph Waldo Emerson goes to see him, they're friends. And Ralph says, "Henry, what are you doing in there?" And Henry says, "Ralph, what are you doing out there?" Now, we may feel that way. We may be inside the church or outside of the church and basically disagree on many things or agree on many things. And we say, do the things I disagree with the church about, does that mean that I would be a hypocrite if I stayed in? Well, in 5 minutes or less, I would like to give you a few reasons why you might want to keep your affiliation with the church, even though there may be policies with which you disagree right now. First of all, we've got some leaders who get how you feel. Dieter Uchtdorf says, "Sometimes we assume that people leave the church because they've been offended or lazy or sinful. Actually, it's not that simple. In fact, there's not just one reason that applies to the variety of situations. Some of our dear members struggle for years with the question of whether they should separate themselves from the church. In this church that honors personal agency so strongly that it was restored by a young man that had questions and sought answers, we respect those who honestly search for the truth. If you have things in your heart that make you feel like, I should separate myself from the church, I understand how you feel. Now, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 reasons that have caused many of us to keep our affiliation with the church even through times of doubt and worry, and why we're happy now that we're still here, and why we wish you'd stay with us. 3 quick things. 1, it's the best training ground in the world for becoming a Christian. The messier and harder it is to be in the church, the better Christian you'll be by being in it. The church offers a small community of imperfect people with whom you probably would never associate if you weren't in a ward together. And the fact that you're in a small congregation together and are all called to serve each other makes it messy and hard and really and truly Christian. When we are left to ourselves, we tend to surround ourselves with people who agree with us politically, socially, emotionally, and we get more and more comfortable. The church knocks you out of all that. And part of that is disagreeing with what goes on and figuring out how you're going to negotiate that. It's a really great training ground. One day I just took a basket of cans of soup and things down to a lady, a neighbor of mine, who had to have her jaw wired shut. She was so touched, she started to cry and said, "No one's ever done anything like this for me." I was dumbfounded. I had gotten so used to being in a community of people who surrounded you and supported you when terrible things happened that I had forgotten how many people live outside of that loving kind of community. I had only begun to see what I felt critical of about it. And it just made me stop and realize how many wonderful people have given me acts of service simply because they were in a community with me and loved me because I was one of them. Now, that has taught me to reach outside that circle and try to extend that kind of service to other people, as it does to many people in the church. And if you get critical of the church because we all just sort of seem to take casseroles to each other, then we need you in the church to help remind us how we need to move outside that circle. Second reason we need you in the church, and I think you need us as well, is because it trains us to be the kind of people who can do good in the world and be part of a larger good. Once when I did my master's degree in my 40s, and for some reason they asked me to speak at commencement. And as I got to commencement, I got up and gave an address to about 1,000 people, maybe more, and sat down. My graduate director turned to me and said, "I don't get how you can just stand up and speak to people and be that comfortable." And I said, "Well, I started when I was about 4, giving my first talk in church." The fact that the church needs us to help makes us become people who can lead and teach. It develops our spiritual gifts, as Paul talks about. And I think the church is invaluable for that. If we make a decision to leave and take our families with us, our children will miss some of the great benefits we had because of our affiliation with the church. The final reason I would like to encourage you to stay in the church, even though you might feel like leaving right now, is that Jesus has placed you here for some reason. And I really and truly believe that Jesus has placed a great generation of young people in this church to kick against it a little bit, to object, to say, listen, We are not going to accept things just the way they've been told to us. We are going to need to have a little more information than that. We're going to need to have a little more input. Armand Moss, who's a great sociologist who has studied small groups for decades, says, not everything that comes along in the church comes straight from deity. Many of the things that come from beneath, from underneath, from the people in the church saying, this needs to change. We are feeling this way. And that causes questions to arise, and that causes changes to be made. You may be a great part of the church moving in a direction that Heavenly Father wants it to move. We can't have diversity in the church if all the people who feel differently leave. We need your input. We need your voice. We need your difference. We need your tattoos. We need your hairstyles. We need your dress styles. We need everything in the church that we can get to make us a bigger community of believers. So before you leave, call me, all right? And have a great day.